Today, we're diving into something that is absolutely fascinating, but yeah, deeply complex. We're talking about the intersection of romance and economics. We'll be navigating the structural, economic, and psychological realities of cross-cultural relationships, specifically looking at dynamics between Western men and Filipino women. My promise to you is to take this incredibly nuanced topic and make it clear, accessible, and, most importantly, highly practical.
Now, I want you to think about an unspoken anxiety that's probably hiding in the back of a lot of guys' minds when they enter into these relationships. Is she choosing me, or is she choosing what comes with me? Let's be real, it's a super uncomfortable question to ask out loud, but acknowledging it is absolutely essential, because leaving that doubt hiding in the shadows, that is exactly what destroys relationships.
Honestly, that single question has destroyed way more relationships than infidelity ever could. Crazy, right? But think about why. Most men either totally dismiss the thought out of pure, blind optimism, or they obsess over it so intensely that they end up poisoning something that could have been genuinely real. Neither of those approaches does you any good, and that is exactly why today we are diving into the actual grounded architecture of cross-cultural attraction.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the data as weight, economic realities.
To really get the romance part, we absolutely have to understand the ground reality first. Imagine a woman who grew up watching her mom literally skip meals just to pay for school fees. She's naturally going to approach love with a completely different set of survival filters. Just take a look at this baseline. The median family income is around 22,000 pesos a month. Even highly skilled essential workers, like public school teachers or provincial nurses, they're earning somewhere between 16,000 and 27,000 pesos. The exact number matters less than the heavy context here. These are educated professionals working tirelessly, yet they remain highly financially fragile.
Now, let's compare that to a typical Western pension. An average retired guy from the West might not feel remotely wealthy back home, right? He drives a normal car, lives in a normal apartment, but when his income lands in this local economy, it acts as a structurally transformative force. And not because he's a millionaire, it's simply because the gap between his financial baseline and the local baseline is genuinely staggering.
Moving on to Section 2, defining the culture, the ethical obligation system.
You see, this financial pressure we just talked about, it isn't just some individual burden. It is baked into a strict cultural system that dictates family life. Take the concept of utang na loob. It's often translated as just a debt of gratitude, but honestly, that translation is way too small. It's really a strict ethical obligation. The idea is, if your parents raised you, their comfort is now your responsibility for life, and that's expected without discussion. In families where money is tight, the one person who manages to earn a little more doesn't just get to keep it. They essentially become the primary financial engine for everyone else.
To put the sheer scale of that obligation into perspective, check this out. A 2022 survey found that 7 out of 10 Filipino workers are financially supporting at least one family member. And for women, the gender norms demand that they play a double role. They have to be both the providers and the emotional caretakers. So when a Filipino woman feels warmth toward a foreign partner, part of that is about him for sure, but part of it is also the profound, literal relief his presence represents in the middle of all that compounding weight.
So here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. Warmth is the baseline here, not the signal. Filipino culture highly prizes accommodation, relational attentiveness, and just general warmth. Now, if you're coming from a Western context where emotional indifference is kind of the default setting, this sudden burst of warmth can feel like profound, highly personal romantic proof. But because this culture inherently trains and rewards people for these behaviors, you absolutely have to look past this baseline warmth to figure out what's genuinely happening beneath the surface.
There's also another major layer to this baseline warmth, and it comes straight out of history. Think about it. 400 years of Spanish rule, right? Followed by American occupation. That deposits a very specific psychological residue over time. The end result is an implicit, measurable positive bias, where Western often equals aspirational. What this means in practice is that a foreign man frequently walks into a room carrying a symbolic premium that has absolutely nothing to do with his individual personality.
Which brings us to Section 3, the architecture of attraction.
It's super important to recognize that this dynamic, this mixing of romance and economics, it's not uniquely Filipino at all. You'll find this exact same architecture in rural Eastern Europe or across Latin America. The real trick here is reframing how we view transactional motives versus romantic ones. We tend to think of them as enemies, right? Like oil and water. But a woman can genuinely love a man while also feeling a deep, profound relief that he has resources. They aren't opposites. Actually, they often exist in the exact same person at the exact same time.
Okay, let's get into Section 4, 3 tests of attachment.
Here's the slightly inconvenient truth, guys. For those first 6 months, a purely economic attachment and a genuinely romantic attachment look almost exactly the same. Both women are going to be warm and both are going to be attentive. To actually figure out the truth, you need specific conditions. You basically need a sequential test to figure out if the relationship is built to last or if it's just a really comfortable illusion. You need to watch what happens when money gets tight, when family boundaries get pushed, and how the whole thing ages over time.
So, test number 1, financial stress. Basically, what happens to her emotional availability when the money suddenly gets tight. A woman who is truly attached to you will remain emotionally present during a financial crunch. Sure, the practical reality of the problem might worry her, but she's in the trenches with you. On the flip side, a woman attached to the lifestyle you offer, she operates like a thermostat. Her warmth will literally track and recalibrate to your financial output. And well, that's just a business arrangement with a little affection sprinkled on top.
All right, test number 2, family boundaries. What exactly does she do when her family asks for something and you say no? Remember that massive ethical obligation system we talked about earlier? A true partner is going to protect you. She will hold that boundary against relentless family requests. But someone who is primarily using you, she's just going to act like a router, constantly redirecting all that family pressure right back onto you until you finally cave and give in.
And finally, test number 3, the deepening relationship. Real durable attachment. It gets richer and way more complicated as the years go by. It accumulates shared weight, inside jokes, and experiences that have absolutely nothing to do with your wallet. Instrumental attachment, the kind that's rooted mostly in what you provide, tends to plateau pretty hard. It manages itself, it maintains the status quo, but it definitely doesn't grow. If you're 3 years in and you feel like you actually know her less than you did in year 1, well, that pattern is screaming the truth at you.
This leads us to our final part, Section 5, the honest reality. So how do we actually use all this info without completely self-sabotaging our chances at happiness? Well, we have to dodge 2 major failure modes. First up is the paranoid man. He shows up treating the relationship like he's some amateur detective, manufacturing fake scarcity, testing every little gesture, treating everything she does like it's a grand scheme. He usually ends up totally alone because, frankly, he was never actually available for anything real. Then, on the other end of the spectrum, there's the willfully ignorant man. He ignores all the structural conditions completely and just operates on blind romantic optimism. He gets blindsided every time, because that economic structure, it's operating in the background whether you want to acknowledge it or not.
Look, we've got to approach this with a lot of empathy. Let's be real, a lot of guys get into these relationships because they just want to feel visible and valued again after years of feeling invisible back home. There's absolutely zero shame in that. But you've got to be honest with yourself about how that kind of starvation shapes your judgment. As the quote perfectly puts it, a man who is starving for attention will pay almost anything to keep receiving it. And sometimes that price is refusing to look too closely at the actual reality of his relationship.
And that brings us to the core mental shift of this whole explainer. Give and take is not some lesser version of love. It's actually just an honest one. You both walked into this dynamic with needs. Maybe she needs some stability, maybe you desperately need her warmth, or simply the way she makes you feel present and alive in your own life again. A relationship where both people can acknowledge what they are getting and still actively choose each other anyway, that is a remarkably solid foundation. It's pretending the exchange isn't happening at all that makes the whole thing so incredibly fragile.
Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. The question isn't just whether she loves you. The real question is, are you paying close enough attention to tell the difference? And are you honest enough with yourself to actually care about the answer? It's time to stop relying on willful ignorance. Because when you finally embrace the honest reality of these dynamics, you blow the door wide open to relationships that are grounded, incredibly durable, and profoundly real. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember, keep asking the hard questions.